We are going to review integrating reading and writing into the content areas because there was a little bit of confusion or misunderstanding, and I want to make sure that everyone understands what this truly means. Your warm-up activity for this week's presentation was to visit the Pennsylvania State Standard website and choose a content area standard. That would be a standard in the area of science, social studies, or health. Also, we could choose math. I didn't give that as one of our options for this course, for this activity, but your content areas can be anything other than reading and writing. Then you were to find a theme to integrate this standard into and share your theme. All of you did that on Padlet, but some of you did not integrate reading and writing into the content areas, and I want to make sure that everyone is clear on how to do that. So I just took some of the pictures from Padlet and posted them, and I wanted to show you the difference between a content standard that has reading and writing integrated into the activity and one that does not. So on your left you see kindergarten activity, and also on the right the standards are not exactly the same because one comes from arts and humanities and one comes from health, but both lessons are looking at emotions. And so we can see that on the left we have a standard that has the children drawing how they feel, and then through the week they're going to look at vocabulary words dealing with emotions. So we really have integrated right there some new vocabulary to go along with art and emotions, which is your content area. On the right hand side you can see that we're learning about the emotions and how they affect how we react. There is no real identification of what the activity will be because when we use that standard or the verb learning, it doesn't really specify what the students are doing. So for this lesson, we really want to think about how can we integrate reading into the lesson and how can we integrate writing into the lesson. So I'm going to show you an easy way to integrate reading, and that's by adding literature. Okay, it seems pretty natural, but a lot of times students don't realize how many great books are out there, and there's books for every content area that you can integrate for every reading level. This is one of my favorites. I've used this book for a long time with my students and my own children, and it's called How Are You Peeling? Foods with Moods. And what they've done is the author has taken photographs of actual real foods and given them personalities, and it's a great way because it's open-ended for students to really explore what do emotions look like and how do we feel when we have those emotions. It's just a really neat book, and students are fascinated by it. So moving on to a new standard, we have 3 different kind of health lessons on nutrition. We have a kindergarten lesson here on the left, we have a kindergarten lesson in the middle, and we have a first grade lesson on the right. So if we look at the lesson on the left, the concept is food comes from a variety of sources, and then they're really looking at farm to table as the competency. And you can see that up in this area. Okay, there's our competencies. For the activity, students can match a picture of a source to a picture of a product. For example, a picture of a cow would be matched to a glass of milk with words labeled underneath. So because the actual lesson is going to have words, we've integrated reading. That's a great one because this activity definitely matches that integrating reading and writing. Then we move on to the one in the middle, and doesn't have a competency. It just has a standard, identify foods that keep our bodies healthy. And it says students will taste various foods and discuss which are healthy and unhealthy. And I really want to go back to that word discuss. What does that mean in kindergarten? Obviously, you're going to have a conversation, but you want something more concrete. If you sit around and talk with kindergartners, you don't know what they're walking away with. So how can we integrate reading and writing in this lesson to make sure that students can really tell you what is a healthy food and what is a not healthy food? And I'm sure you can probably think of some ways. And moving on, we've kind of piggybacked. It is a first grade lesson, but for the same kind of lesson, we have looking at healthy foods and variety of food sources using the food pyramid. So for this lesson, students will form into groups of 3 and make poster boards mapping good eating choices that affect the body, and then share that. So now we've taken that lesson of healthy and unhealthy, and we're making posters of good choices, good healthy foods. And so that's going to integrate drawing and also writing. So those are important to do, and you could definitely do that in kindergarten. You could definitely have them make posters in kindergarten and do a little bit of labeling. Now, when I look on the next page, I've actually integrated some reading for any of these lessons. One is a nonfiction book, Are You What You Eat? And it's a really fun book that looks at, nutritious foods and what happens if you put good food in your body and what happens if you put bad food in your body. And then I'm pairing that, because we're going to make a text set, with Gregory the Terrible Eater. And this is a fiction book, of course, about Gregory, and he is a goat, and he likes to eat trash and all kinds of stuff. And that's what goats do. But this book is neat because it really talks about what would happen to Gregory if he ate good foods instead of things that were trash. So it's a fun way to make that lessons point, that content of eating healthy, come right to the surface, but using literature at the start of our lesson. Another lesson that was posted on Padlet was for the music and movement standard, knowing and using basic elements and principles of music and movement. And the activity is have them play musical chairs and then pick musical instruments and play them. So I don't know that would actually go into one lesson. Musical chairs is one thing. Musical instruments is completely, you could spend many, many weeks on. So I just focused on the musical instrument part of the lesson. And, it's very easy to integrate literature, like I've said about 10 times this morning. So I found a fun book called 88 Instruments. It's about a little boy that goes into a music store, and in that music store, he's trying to choose an instrument, and he's looking at all of the different choices they have. It's a fiction book, but again, it's going to introduce students to a lot of those different instruments. I would probably piggyback that with a virtual field trip or using a YouTube video to an actual music store. There's a lot of great clips like that you can find. And then I would probably have the students draw a picture of the musical instrument that they would choose at that time if they went to a music store and why they would choose it. Even though this is kindergarten, this is a pre-K lesson, we could do that as an interactive writing activity. They could draw their picture, and then interactively we could write something that says, Tanya would choose a saxophone. Fiona would choose a drum. And we could write that using the language experience approach. Or you could have them draw it and kid write it and have adults come in and do the underwriting. So lots of different options for kindergarten. And we could even make that then into a class book. So taking all their pictures and stories and binding them and putting it in the library center so everyone can go back and read. And that's going to review, again, that reading-writing connection, but give them a chance to learn about musical instruments again. So again, very easy to do. All right, so another area that we may not realize would be easy to integrate reading and writing is in the arts. So we have a first grade standard, and the activity is to look at different kind of art and see how everyone interprets it differently. That's a really big activity that it needs to be more specific for sure, but there is no integration of reading or writing in this activity. So I just did a quick search. I've actually seen this book before in a bookstore. It's called Are You an Art Sleuth? And it looks at all kinds of different artworks in galleries, and it has photographs of the actual artwork, and then it kind of takes you on a scavenger hunt throughout the book. So I thought that would be a really great book for the students to look, read to them, and then they could talk about how they interpret, one of the pictures. So you could put them into small groups and they could analyze a picture and talk about what it makes them think of. And that would be your drawing and writing component to the lesson. So last but not least, I chose an activity that's an excellent activity, but it has some natural reading and writing tendencies that could be included in it. So we're looking at a kindergarten lesson on plants, and the students are going to be basically planting their own seeds